Hey guys, it's Ryan, and today's video is going to be a long form recap of my experience in the IGL satellite from January through to March. As you can tell by the thumbnail, I didn't do great, but I had a great time playing so much Infinity so consistently. In this video, I'll cover my games, but through the lens of my lists as a framing device. I'll talk about where I stand with them, where I went wrong, and how I want to play military orders going forward. Despite starting Tunguska, I am still a knight guy at heart. So please remember to like and subscribe. If you're not already, it helps the channel out if you do. So let's begin with a bit of a foreword. So while this video is framed around my 4 lists, 2 for round 1 through 3 and 2 for 4 through 6, due to the way the satellite was set up, it is not a video in which I espouse the greatness of my list building prowess. It is in fact merely a framing device in which I talk about the real driver of the games, myself, and the limitations I faced. It is a known fact, and what I want to be clear on, Infinity is not won or lost at list building, and net decking or net listing to win isn't really a thing. Good lists do appear and are commonly used, but it's 100% the pilot that guarantees the results. So this was a list I built for last launch and potentially frontline. The origins of this list, as if you can't tell by its name, is a net list. I know I just talked about net listing not really being a thing, but you can definitely take a good list and modify them to your needs like I have here. Originally I think it featured Dart, an ordinary order sergeant, and some other optimizations, but I unoptimized it to make it a bit more my flavour with a second Trin and a hacker. I also removed the second Trin and added in an evil bot and Robin Hook. Why? Well, I mean, a BS 15 min-6 burst 5 Spitfire sounds like a fun shooter. And to be honest, Hook looks fun. Optimal? No, but workable. The rest of this list is a fairly solid base with the Teak Belang, the Fantastic Light Tag, the aforementioned Harris, my now bog standard core with the Teutonic Lieutenant and Missile Launcher, an OS Hacker, Crozier Paramedic, and a random Crozier. The usual gag of support shows up with bots and a tech B to support the tag and bops, and of course, Robin Hook. Game 1, and the only game I play with this list in the end, was against Vanilla Hack Islam on last launch. It was a good game with a rather uneventful turn 1, which resulted in an isolated but not soft lock Teak, a broken fireteam core, and a dead Harris, which sounds worse than it actually was. Turn 1 basically set the board for both of us, with my Teak doing what I wanted and taking this left hand side building and controlling it. After dealing with the Hunzakut that dropped the repeaters, stupidly risking the Teak that could have been carbonated as I went about flaming repeaters. The Teak went on to basically demand respect, as any movement from their Barids or Fides would be a face-to-face roll against a strong tag. With this tag isolated, it meant I could still pose more of a threat in the arrow, and I'd still have 2 orders to spend on it, which should be enough for the Teak. I believe this is the turn where my Trin, the absolute madman, moves up to fight a Mut and a Cum sister and kills them both in one exchange. This is obviously a fortunate outcome, and I do this sometimes just to contest multiple arrows. It usually never works and often gets one of the targets down, but usually costs me my attacker. But it sometimes does more, and it did on this day. It would put both down and boost my confidence a lot more. Round 2 is more interesting as, like I said, my opponent slaughters my Harris with an isolated tag, dead engineer, and very shortly after this, a broken core. I fear the worst. Hook can't get buttons, and with Arm 5 and crap weapons, she is not going to clear an Asawaria. So I took a risk and used the Tech B to pick up the Bulletier, and wow, it works. A long bomb gizmo kit worked, and the Bulletier got up and angrily responded, activating it and immediately assaulting the Rafik, putting it down. With them gone, I feel a lot more comfortable. His last specialist is his Namur, who has hidden herself away after I completely whiffed 4 dice on 15s. It was truly impressive. I tried to get a position on the box so I can maybe dissuade runs on it, and I put marksmanship on my Bulletier. My opponent has reminded me that my Trin in fact fought and killed the Mutar, who was making a run on the ID scanner. A lucky ARO crit from the SMG, putting it straight to dead. This game was really wacky for stuff like this. Turn 3 is where the game is decided. The Asawaria and Namur duo moved out, but a day late and $1 short, and would not be able to get the ID token and extract a trooper, meaning a domination and specialist kill victory only, which was looking likely unless I can kill his 2 Barids. So, during this turn, the pair would duel my Hook, and she would kill the Namur but die to the Asawaria. The Bulletier would get berserked, but at this point he had done everything from spotlighting the Namur to surviving a missile from a missile bot. The Bulletier surviving a missile was really a wacky experience. I got shot in the rear for free by the bot. Then I would roll the 3 saves needed to courage into cover to contest any further shots. This plus the Trin's actions and the Teak's whiff shots against the Namur just really cemented the fact that this was one to remember. I would end the game by throwing my lieutenant into the box, and basically that was it. It was not enough though, with that only scoring 1 point from dominating the box, and my opponent scored a classified and killed more specialists and got the win. A close but very good game, a 3-1 loss. So this list performed exactly like I wanted it, in a weird roundabout way. The Teak Balang demanded respect and moved to an Overwatch position to provide fire support even when isolated. Well, a softlock would have killed an engineer, which I did have, would have brought it back. But this is where pilot skill comes into play. I probably misplaced the Teak and my engineer, and maybe should have kept it further back or moved it onto the right of my deployment near the engineer. If my opponent had made a better choice here, I could have very easily lost the Teak and turn 1 just trying to recover it. Additionally, the placement of my Harris team meant the Murtaur just picked it apart. I spent so much time worrying about a Fide on this squishy fire team, I didn't see the forest for the branch right in front of me. Despite their demise, the Harris did more or less what I wanted. It was a solid secondary gunner, and the Bulletier's Rempress also helped smooth out the randomness. It helped that when it went down, it got back up and just killed stuff. It was very lucky, but overall, it worked. Things I would redo if I played this exact map and match again. I would redeploy the tag better position the Harris, and keep the core further back to save it from hackers. Things I learned from this. Sometimes it's worth taking risks if it means I could kill a cum sister. Those gals are lethal. Also, fear the Azrael. Regarding this list, I apologise. I don't exactly know who made it, as I have lost the document with the winning list from IGL. If this list is yours, or you used it in the IGL, let me know in the comments below and I'll give it a pin. I really enjoyed the concept. Overall, it was a good list, and if I were a better pilot, it would have carried me against vanilla Hack Islam. BS15 mimetic shooters are very good, and this has become my go-to tag list. Round 2 and 3 had 2 similar results and the same list. Both were a major loss. It was Armory against Steel Phalanx in round 2, and Frontline versus USARF in round 3. The list was as follows. The same 2 trends I usually take: Soul Teutonic Knight, Pathfinder, and an interesting Knight Hospitaller Harris with a Knight of Santiago. I do like this list. It served me well, but like the last one, it needed a better driver. I still think that it has some quality to it, as I keep gravitating back to lists like it. However, there are some obvious flaws in this list, and it did become apparent when played that compounded into poorer and lacking plays. The 3 big ones that come up in these rounds are a lack of AP, MSV, and a secondary shooter. The first one actually matters more in round 4, so I'll speak to it there, but let's start with MSV and how I had a game against Steel Phalanx in Armory. Unfortunately, they won the lieutenant role, and I went first so I could have a slightly better side. My turn 1, I basically didn't do much, but that was because of his 3 ARO pieces. Juicer in a Harris, which is manageable since it's only min -3, so I could in theory brute force that. A Mackay, which is min -3, and MSV in that same Harris, which is also manageable. And Phoenix, which is min -6 and not really manageable without MSV or a tag. The way deployment fell, I could only really engage 2 of the 3 with my HMG, but I needed all 3 removed to really do anything with my Harris beyond being trapped in my DC. After throwing a coordinated order with the Trinitarian and Teutonic Knight to take on the Mackay and losing the Knight, I eventually moved my HMG, and fortunately I did manage to brute force it down with BS14 down to 11s with 5 dice. It went down in 2 or 3 orders. Then, by fluke, my Trinitarian got a forward observe off on Phoenix, which changed the face-to-face maths on him. This made it much more reasonable to fight him, and with another few orders he went unconscious. But this had cost me so many orders I couldn't do anything conducive to the mission or waste enough of his orders for it to be worthwhile. With not enough damage done, Macaon would get Phoenix back up, and Hippolyta and his fire team would make runs at the armory. They'd take the points from round 1. Round 2 wouldn't get much better. I'd get the Santiago into the box thanks to impersonation, and the HMG gave both the Hoplite and Chusser a good licking, but would go down to Hoplite or Hippolyta in his turn. Round 2 would end up a bloody wash with no points scored because of the cost of the Knight of Santiago versus the Hoplite Engineer. In here, I duelled a Myrmidon with the Santiago and got lucky and tanked a chain rival and cleaned them with my Nanopulsar. If he had not done that, I would have lost the point here as well. Turn 3 would be a great example of why I needed MSV. In order to win, I need to get my Doctor into the box, but I had to waste a ton of orders just shooting Hippolyta as I moved up to just die as I reached the box. It was close, the map hampered me, but really I needed MSV to make this matchup much easier. This would result in an 8-0 loss. I talk about needing MSV, but it would not immediately fix all my problems, especially in MO, since my MSV options are Dart, Blackfriar, or Crozier Spitfire. The heavy rocket launcher Blackfriar could have been useful here, but she isn't in the list. I do think MSV is not as important for MO, mostly because those that have smoke tend to have melee and tend to avoid knights because knights make warbands trade much better than other heavy infantry who lack melee. I also incorrectly thought I wouldn't mind dealing with min-6 shooters that way as well, since the good shooters tend to be crap in melee, and if it's only min-3, we have BS14 plus HMGs, again, to brute force things. With Steel Phalanx, is the combo of min-6 and good melee that causes a struggle. Steel Phalanx can't shoot well, it maxes out on 14th. If I had brought a tag plus Knight Harris, I think I would have gone to town, forcing Phoenix and the Maquet down, and taking the armory. But this doesn't solve the MSV issue, it just plays around it. The game also shows a lack of a secondary shooter. With the burst I could have also done more damage, but with no extra burst for guns I didn't have the oomph to do damage. The Knight, Doctor and Santiago are good shooters and the Trins and Teutonic Knights are acceptable, but it's all only SMGs, Panzers, Rifles and Forward Observers. It is not enough for what I'm wanting. In my other armies I'm building lists that have some combination of tags, HMGs and Spitfires. I know Military Orders is not those armies, but I know it's capable of another burst 4 gun. Game 3 definitely showed me that as well. Game 3 was much more of a wash due to pilot error resulting in a 10-1 loss. I misplaced the Harris fighting a dug-in grunt core. I left myself open to a biker Harris that I completely forgot about and lost most of it for my mistake. The Doctor again lived and tried to fight its way into doing something useful but died on the charge. In the end it wasn't enough. Here MSV would have been nice, but the main thing I desired was a secondary shooter. After playing poorly and rightly punished for it by a good opponent, having something beyond an SMG or a missile launcher would have allowed me to thin out of his orders and maybe score another classified. Spitfire or a Red Fury Knight would probably have helped stem the loss, although I would have had to get to my senses together, which is not guaranteed. This list is kind of weirdly fragile once the HMG dies. I just have to really step up with some OK profiles to win, which is just making things harder for myself. There is no redundancy. Overall, I think this list needs tweaking. Maybe cheapen the core and swap out the Pathfinder to something like a Raveneye, and picking up either the Red Fury Montesa, or if I really scrimp and save, the Santiago Joan or Teutonic Knight NCO Spitfire. I like this style of list, and I'm going to have it as my list 1 going forward, with some tweaks until I'm happy with it. One thing to note, I slate my list for lacking X, Y, Z, and maybe 1, 2, 3, but looking back I can see the misplays I made, the decisions that I should have remade, errors I should have capitalised on and pressed, but instead I didn't. The list gave me issues, but I could have played around them. I know I talk about 2 absolutely brutal losses, but I want to outright state that both my opponents were absolutely lovely, and even when I was taking a little longer to recover from my cock-up cascade, they were very much understanding. Both wonderful players and would play against them again. Jumping ahead to round 5 and list 3, this game was against Morats and Firefight, and this was a much better showing, resulting in a draw. It was close though, I had assumed I'd won until I got pointed out to the fact that he had secured HVT, so it was a 4-4 draw. I'd gone with a tag list and one with a drop Santiago, mostly to take advantage of that +3 airborne deployment and present as few specialists as possible, so no ability or Harris. Going in, I know this list lacks a few nice to haves like secondary shooters, but I was hoping the Teak would do the damage, which fortunately it did. So, game 5, and I roll 12 for the Lieutenant roll, and they roll 13. This is the 4th out of 5 games where I lost the Lieutenant roll, but at this point, it's fine. He decides to go first, and I take the more defensible side. His turn goes well for me, only killing my core, but not my Lieutenant, so he trades 1 specialist, and 50 points, Anya and a K-Talk, into my 2 specialists and 75 points and more orders. Not great, but to be honest, I'd rather that happen than lose the tag to a Yaugat. To end his turn, he stands up the Surat and doesn't hide the Yaugat well enough. Now, in this turn, I would basically set up the final score. I would spend all 5 of the remaining Teak's orders to move up, see the Surat and kill it dead, climb up a wall and kill the Yaugat dead, and then hide back where I started. Or, well, I don't kill the Morat's dead, more the paramedic does in his turn too, which is lucky because the dice saved me here. This little 5-order exchange to take out 2 of his biggest guns is why the Teak is an amazing tag, and I've come around to running one. I think the first exchange was 2 on 16s versus 4 on 15s, and then the second exchange was 4 on 18s versus 2 on 16s. Both were just what I needed. Turn 2 was basically him killing Hook with Gazis, me failing to remember to do a classified while in melee with the Gazis. My 1 Trin does their job and gets a classified off, and I drop in the Santiago. Here I am looking for 19s or less, and I roll a 19. The dice taunting me as it rolls a success. I then do a classified in their drop zone and mark her up. This basically puts us at like 3-2 to him going into the last round. Turn 3, he moves Kordak to score the Panoplies and secure the HVT, and attempts to kill my lieutenant with his Datarazi, but instead allows me to hide the knight via copious amounts of dodging on 17s. Well, I don't like the fact that our cheapest lieutenant is 19 points, but I have to admit it's a damn sturdy, damn fine lieutenant for its cost. Whip 13 means it's a basic but nice lieutenant, with it possibly being a decoy for a knight hospitaller, or it could be a knight commander in hiding. Even if they do go for it, sure, they're weak to hacking, but it's 2 wounds, CC 22, martial arts level 2 with a shotgun Panzerfaust and dodge 17 to valiantly run away or pepper them with buckshot. It's a good lieutenant choice, and it was the right one here. The game ends with a stage dive and killing a Dartok, although not from the stage dive. I guarantee more kills with the Dartok, but I was already slightly ahead in that regard. The game finishes with the 4-4. I have 175 points left to his 137. I did 2 classifieds. He has more Panoplies, more specialist kills, and secures my HVT. A close and fun game. Much like game 1, there was a combination of plays that probably could have won me the game in turn 3, or just remembering to do that last classified sooner would have gotten me the last points I needed. However, this is the sort of things that keeps happening, so I should always try and remember to do these things going forward, rather than spend time griping about after the game. To do, remember my classifieds. Good game overall, and I would play this opponent again, but this list I would not run again unless I could get border skirmishes or firefight to get that +3 landing bonus, because I do not like secondary big pieces in this list being completely random and going down. You know what doesn't have a random chance to go down? Trends. They just go down in my half the board and do work. So I like the list, but I wouldn't run it again, to be honest. Just not my style, but it might be yours. Game 4 against Cosmoflaw, and the mission is Ear Engineering Deck by Headchime, which is a modified version of an older ITS mission and does a couple of unique things. First, consoles when connected don't disconnect or flip to your opponent. 2, it's a long skill to push the button. 3, there is also a minor zone of control mission at the end of the game, so it's slightly more favoured to go first. Like almost all other games in the Satellite, I lost the lieutenant role. I was against Wallace after all. They decided to go first, which is fair. They definitely have the ability to capitalise on it with a bear, 2 Ermendinos and Usha. But my first list is basically the same as my round 2 and 3 list, but with a Knight of Justice Hacker, which is mildly more durable and sometimes more useful. But it drops the Teutonic Knight and brings more bots, including an Evo Hacker. If you're a long-time follower of the channel, I ran this list to success last June at the Highland Brawl, coming 3rd in a local event. I praised this list for being able to do things when it went well, however I did just talk about how when I misplayed a very similar list, it can go poorly. This is really a modification of the second list rather than a new list. Long story short, I know this list fairly well and I'm aware of its weaknesses and strengths by this point. So round 1 was an interesting affair, with Usha going right next to my fire team, getting discovered immediately by my Pathfinder, then spending turn 1 breaking up my fire team and only really killing the paramedic and missile launcher, which I think on any other map would have been horrifying, but to be honest, ARO was not good on this map. So I was more a little annoyed about how stupidly I had placed my team and who was leader, but it did end with my Order Sergeant spotlighting Usha, and my lieutenant was alive, so that's good. Importantly though, that same Pathfinder just coming in clutch stuns the Soldat who was trying to get the center button, denying him 2 OP off the bat and maybe saving me from a loss. My turn 1 was a little more housekeeping. I killed Usha, pressed the button safely with a Trin, and moved my Order Sergeant to do the same thing on the other side. A lot of little stuff just to make my life easier and make me more likely to score a point, because after 2 brutal losses, I just wanted to score some points. Turn 2 was a brutal assault by the bear that left me in loss of lieutenant, which was not fun, but recoverable, and they pushed some buttons to secure 1 OP for themselves. This was him capitalising more on my mistakes from the first round. In loss of lieutenant, I basically moved my doctor back a bit, revived the missile launcher in order to delay the bear, hide my Knight of Justice a little more, so I could in fact score the middle button on my turn 3 and re-cameled my Trin. I still had 1 in hidden deployment that would be vital for the outcome of the match. Turn 3 was brutal, but the game was decided here. The bear killed the missile launcher again, the HMG would die to a wandering SAS that I should have laid mines against, the SAS would die to the Knight of Justice combi, the bear would then berserk the Doctor Deg, and then, while in dogged, die to the Knight of Justice, whose arm 5 was just enough to survive, while my damage 15 beat his arm 5. My turn 3 saw my Trinitarian sneak into box and successfully decharge the wounded soldat. In hindsight, it would have been safer to SMG him, but I really wanted him dead, so my Knight of Justice could just take the box. With that dealt with, I would go ahead and run the Knight of Justice into the box and win the game, pushing some buttons and dominating the zone. This game really exemplifies my problems I was talking about above. The lack of a secondary shooter less so, but the need for AP on a shooter like the Knight Hospitaller HMG would have probably made it easier to kill the Soldat, and I could have just taken the armory that first turn if I didn't waste orders fighting it. Something like 4 orders just wasted not doing damage to arm 9 in cover. MSV here would have really delayed Usha and the bear, mostly because the Blackfire with 6th Sense could and probably would have just templated both of them with nanopulsars for damage 13 on BTS 0 and denied smoke across the board. Anyway, a close win and another win for this list. 4 times playing it, 3 total wins. Final game for me, game 6. 92 started the satellite and 46 remain. I'm towards the bottom going in. I have 3 losses, 1 win, and a draw, sitting at 8 tournament points, 11 OP, and 573 VP. This final game was a perfect summary of all the games that came before, and was a really great game regardless. It was against Bakunin, which was terrifying, but was more a non-focus list, with I think only an unlinked Uhahu, and maybe a hacker and a Harris. A pure core heavy rocket launcher Cenobite watched this central corridor and held down my heavy infantry Harris, much like Steel Phalanx did earlier. I'll mention it now, but it only comes up twice, but shots over 24 inches outside in this map are considered low visibility zone, which is a pain and does annoy me once, but doesn't matter the second time. I appreciate and enjoy the use of map notes like this in this IGL, and it made the tables really interesting. So, turn 1, I win the lieutenant role and opt to go first, knowing that I sometimes struggle to do enough damage and I can't let them dictate the hacking tempo. With that overwatch from the Cenobite, I spent turn 1 using my Trin to enter the building via a door, walk up under a camel, push the button, guessing that his left hand side HVT was the data tracker, and I was right. The Pathfinder advances quickly and his data tracker is dead. I move the Pathfinder up into an ARO position down the shorter corridor and the Fukazi to protect it. The Harris also withdraws, so Uhahu is going to need to spend a few orders to hack them. His turn, he advances his Uhahu up, away from my Pathfinder, and eventually wanders into our repeater and gets isolated and spotlit, but impersonates up. The Harris advances and reveals my left-hand side HVT as a decoy, and nothing else happens. Turn 2 is an interesting turn, as the game is really decided here. I use the Pathfinder to move past the isolated Uhahu, reveal but not kill her, this matters later, and push as closest to a fire team as possible without being spotted to start hacking this fire team. Now this is where pilot skill comes into play. I have 2 options. I could waste the Pathfinder getting into bad shootouts with this fire team, or I can use my hacker, Knight of Justice, to tear apart this fire team, and that's what I choose to do. I chose to isolate the heavy rocket launcher Cenobite and fire team lead. That goes through easy enough and breaks the fire team. I choose to spotlight 1 or 2 pieces and then move the Harris out to fight, knocking Moira unconscious, push a button and kill a decoy. I'm at 4 points now and I'm feeling confident. It's turn 2, the game changes. Pointless stuff happens, like the heavy rocket launcher fights the HMG. His other Cenobite gets immobilized while killing my Trin, and Uhahu gets stunned. Important stuff that would decide the game was that Dima kills my Teutonic Knight missile launcher and my decoy. The Harris advances unseen. due to closed doors and stealth, and kills my Knight Hospitaller HMG, Knight of Justice, and more importantly, pushes a button and kills my central HVT, who was my data tracker. That swings him ahead. Turn 3 is my turn not to lose. If I can get a specialist to the button, I can maybe keep the console, because I can't get enough orders to push the button and kill his last decoy. So I move my second Trin in and throw a bad dodge. I get templated and die. I try to get my Knight Hospitaller Doctor onto the button, which I do, but I fail the whip roll and lose the game basically. To clear up the game, he resets Uhahu, she moves out and pushes a button. They kill my last decoy and win handily 7-4. A very close game and well done to my opponent. So why did I lose this one? Was it my list? Was it pilot error? Was I completely outskilled? Maybe yes, probably not. We were pretty evenly matched. So this game really showed off that, yeah, MSV would be needed and that the Teutonic Knight versus Blackfire debate isn't settled. Sure, the Blackfire could have actually done well here, but the Teutonic Knight had the best bet to survive on a non-elevated point against warbands. I think in hindsight, if I knew the maps better, I probably would have taken the Blackfire, and she could have really rolled the Nun Core and the shorter lanes on game 4. I could have used a secondary shooter, but this time it didn't matter. The Pathfinder did its job well enough despite not shooting, but if I had more orders, he could have done a lot more damage. AP didn't matter, but the hacking that the Knight of Justice brought was great. So, player skill. Could I have won? Yes, I believe I could have, but as I said, round 2 was the decider, not round 3. They still had all the orders possible to clear off my Knight Hospitaller from a button if I had got it, and thus probably would have won another way. There were a lot of mistakes I made here. I should have killed Uhahu rather than leave her in marker state or standing alive. I did in the end have enough movement to make the hack on the Cenobite and break the fire team. Fire team wise, I should have pushed the button and moved at least one Knight into the hallway to delay any attempts to push buttons, but I decided to defend my last decoy. Either way, I did not do nearly enough damage to win here. I ended the game with like 127 points and him 250. He just out-ordered me. This is a problem I feel with me. I don't kill enough when I should, and if I had curbed his specialist, sacrificing the Pathfinder to take out the Doctor and not his Cenobites, this probably would have been a different result. I definitely need to figure out how to better capitalise on attacks with military orders, and I think I have the list now to do that. My opponent, thank you for a wonderful game. Hopefully we can get another one soon. So this is the bit where I talk about the league as a whole. I don't have the exact numbers because OTM, the front page, and IGL leaderboards are all out of sync, but as I'm writing, I'm looking at finishing in the high 50s, which is nice, but not my target of getting the top half, which is really unfortunate because a ton of people dropped out after round 3. So in 6 games, I didn't manage to do better than a good portion of people did in 3 or 4 games. And to be honest, I'm not surprised. I know I'm not the best player, especially when I go into the wide pond that is the IGL, and when I'm just not getting in games as much as I'd like. So would I do it again? Well, timing permitting, yeah, absolutely. It was great to play games so consistently. The opponents were great and the running of it was solid. Any issues, which were few and far between, the moderators were available and there to sort it. So do I recommend it to you? Well, if you're confident or at least practice at 300 points, have experience playing on TTS and have a few nights a week you could play, then yeah, I very much do. Finally, what did I learn from playing? Well, I gotta practice. I make a lot of mistakes and wasteful plays, and those I got to learn to identify and resolve. Personally, I feel like I want to play quicker as well. Fortunately, I've found the lists I want to stick with. Mild tangent right at the end, I listened to a podcast with Lobo, a very experienced and well-regarded player, and basically they talk about just picking some lists and getting really good with those lists, and I think I'm going to take that to heart. I still need to nail down exactly what I want in one of those lists, but I'm largely there, just figuring out the details. Tangent over, more games, less mistakes, and kill as much as I can of my opponent's models. On screen, you'll see what I want to play in the future, and I think these have some great legs. As you can see, one of them is literally just the IGL 8 modified list. I really like this list. It offers everything I wanted from a military orders list, or well, a military orders list that doesn't make extensive use of knights. I might drop Hook, but I really like her for fun, and I believe she does offer some utility as a repeater and a mobile stealthy piece, so she stays for now. The Teak is the firepower, the ability to harass moves quickly, and can just take on most fights quite well. List 2 is probably the Knight Santiago. Harris rather than the Knight of Justice. Knight of Justice is just a mean, not very lean piece that can do a lot when it needs to, but the Knight of Santiago I just think is going to be better value for the points, and it means I can just use that to bring in a Montesa, which will solve a lot of my issues with secondary pieces and can punish null deploys, which I really struggle with. Group 2 I'm a little worried with orders, but that will come out in the wash. My alternative to this is an NTO Teutonic Knight or a Spitfire Crusader Brethren to come and do damage. But again, I'll find out what I want through practice games. Overall, I don't know if I'll do the next IGL, as it's usually the one with a twist, but I wouldn't be opposed to it, just timing depending as a parent. However, I think the next event I will run my current fancy, Tunguska. I wonder how that will go. So that was my video on the IGL satellite for January 2024. It was a great experience and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you competed, let me know how you got on in the comments below. If you didn't, let me know if you would going forward. Remember to like and subscribe for more. Next video will be on Torchlight Brigade. As always, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you next time.